All right, I see people filtering in. Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan, and I'm an event manager at Politics and Prose, and I'd like to welcome you all to PNP Live. Soon, I will drop a link in the chat for where you can purchase a copy of Nigger, The Strange Career of a Troublesome Word, straight from PNP's website. You can ask our speakers a question this afternoon by clicking on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And we will try to get to as many of those questions as we can towards the end of the program, but we apologize in advance if we don't have a time to address your question. Also, there are auto captions for this event by hitting the live caption button at the bottom of your screen. Let me introduce our guest for this afternoon. Randall Kennedy is the Michael R. Klein Professor at Harvard Law School, where he teaches courses on contracts, criminal law, and the regulation of race relations. He is a member of the Bar of the District of Columbia, the American Law Institute, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He is the author of 7 books. Kennedy will be in conversation with Kiese Laymon, the author of the genre-bending novel Long Division and the essay collection How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America. Laymon's best-selling memoir, Heavy, an American Memoir, won multiple awards, including the 2019 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Nonfiction. Laymon is the recipient of the 2020 through 2021 Radcliffe Fellowship at Harvard. He is the founder of the Catherine Coleman Literary Arts and Justice Initiative, a program aimed at getting Mississippi kids and their parents more comfortable reading, writing, revising, and sharing. Please give our guests a virtual round of applause.
All right. Oh, how you doing, Professor Kennedy? How are you today?
I'm very well, and I really look forward to talking with you.
Yeah, and I just want to let folks know, before we got on in the virtual green room, I asked Professor Kennedy if he wanted to read a bit from the new edition, and Professor Kennedy said, "No, let's just get it in. Let's just talk." So we're just gonna have a conversation. And while we have this conversation, y'all, my assumption is that there are gonna be lots of questions or comments. And I'm gonna try as organically as possible to blend those into the conversation. So make sure you ask those in the question and answer section there at the bottom. But before we start, I just want to give my short history or encounter with the actual book. I was teaching at Vassar for less than a year, and I was just telling Professor Kennedy this. I would go to Best Buy on Tuesdays to buy my album, to buy my music. I just gotten a job. I was an adjunct, so I wasn't, I thought making $22,000. I thought I was rich. I could go buy any book or any fucking CD I wanted. So I went to buy my CDs, and then I sprinted downstairs to the bookstore because I knew the book was coming out, nigga. And I got it, and I read it, and it fucked me up, right? Because I had to go back to the classroom the next day with ideas that I had not thought about, concepts I had not thought about, histories I had not thought about, law precedents I had not thought about. And one of the interesting things about reading this new edition, I just want to start here, is that you've had 20 years since this book has been initially published to rethink, to understand, to sort of take inventory of the new conversations, if they are new at all. And what this edition seems to me is, it seems like, I'm not sure if you've come to any different conclusions. It seems like in this book, you have used the last 20 years to prove your point. I'm interested in whether or not you feel like that reading is fair. Have you come to any new conclusions or new ideas and theories about nigger since writing nigger 20 years ago?
I think that your view is pretty accurate, with one exception. So 20 years ago, I said something to the effect that no politician with national ambitions would get close to being no politician with national ambitions would put himself in a position where someone could plausibly accuse him of using nigger in the old-fashioned way. That is to say, as a, in the derogatory way.
Right.
Well, on that one, I was wrong. On that one, I was wrong.
You're a little bit wrong.
Absolutely, because we just had a president. Now, we don't know for sure, but there were allegations that he used the infamous N-word in the old-fashioned, the derogatory way. And frankly, he denied it half-heartedly.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody made a big deal of it.
Right.
It was as if, my sense is that a lot of people thought, well, probably he did. and shrugged.
Right.
Because, standards had been depressed so much. I think there were a lot of people who felt, yeah, he probably did, no surprise. And I think that, it was sort of a non-story. Well, that surprised me. 20 years ago, I would not have thought that would be the case.
Right.
And of course, that's a very sad story. That's a story about how our standards have just gone down, down, down.
But I'm interested in how that misreading of the nation, really, or the majority of white people in the nation, because that president got the majority of the white vote. How does that misreading of the nation actually not shift other readings in the book, right? Like, so if one misreads the nation so much that they can be like, there'd never be a president who could be associated with this utterance of the word who be elected. Mm-hmm. It might make me believe that there are other parts of the many theories that you lay out about the word that might also need a little bit of like teasing. And what we see is like in the introduction, I encourage you all to please get this book and buy the former one if you could, because again you use so many precedents, and it's a compelling case. If one wants it to be a compelling case, but one of my concerns as a young person, as a young teacher, is still one of my concerns as a middle-aged teacher, which is it felt like, as far as the classroom, it read to me like you had chosen to see the POV of the white benevolent professor or teacher who uses the word in quotes or whatever, and you got behind that, and you show us why and how, you show the way these people have been disciplined. But I did not see that kind of rigorous exploration of the aggrieved or the harmed. And go ahead, jump in there.
On that one, so in the new introduction, the first pages are devoted to case after case after case of this word being used in a derogatory way, being used as a way of putting people down, being used as a way of terrorizing people. I mean, in the very first, I give cases of murderers. I give cases of rapists. I give cases of arsonists. I give police who were engaged in brutal action. I try to make the point that this is a word that is part of the soundtrack of racial atrocity in the United States. I do that in the new introduction, and I did that 20 years ago in the initial. And what I wanted to do was to make clear that is that's the origins.
Right.
That's the ground from which this word grows. And let's be clear about that. And so right. I try to establish that so that there's no room for doubt about where I'm coming from. Now, now after I've established that, I then say, now, if that was all there was to the word, it would still warrant treatment. It would still warrant a book, because the racist use of nigger is so important in American life. I mean, it's, been hugely important, and we need to know all about it.
Right.
But actually, the word is even more interesting because it is used not only as a weapon deployed by racists, it has been used against racism. It's been used in comedy. It's been used in satire. It's been put to all sorts of uses. And that's where I get to this other stuff. And of course, it's this other stuff that's controversial, because frankly,
right.
No, it's the first thing is not controversial. People
Right.
are interested in it, but there's no controversy about that.
No doubt. Right. But the controversy, I think there are a number of controversies, but one of the singular controversy to me comes in, again, as practitioners in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is absolutely, you absolutely do exactly what you said. And which also I think makes the pivot a lot more courageous, regardless of what I think of it. And I just want to start with this just essential question, because we only have 45 minutes. I don't know if I'm ever going to talk to you again, but what I want to know is, what do you say to the Black student who was in a majority white classroom, in a majority white school, in a majority white town, who has been terrorized in that majority white town, who was terrorized going to that classroom, who sits in that classroom that is haunted, and then has a benevolent and or well-meaning white teacher say or quote the word nigger, and that person feels, I think you used the word harm, one might say humiliation. I'm sure you've had this question a million times. And what I was interested in this 20th anniversary edition is how at all you get behind the POV of that humiliated student who has to sit there and if let your book tell it, just be part of some intellectual enterprise where somebody is attempting to teach them something else. What do you do with Black students' humiliation at the use of that word by quote unquote well-meaning white teachers in 2022? That's the first question.
Yeah, first thing I do is, I'm talking with the student. I would want the student to tell me this, what is it that they are feeling?
Right.
And why? Because frankly, I think that the student, for instance, that you've just depicted, the student who truly feels humiliated, for instance, I don't doubt that there are some such students. At the same time, I don't want to be sentimental. If a student comes into me and says, gosh, I'm discombobulated, I feel humiliated, I feel traumatized because I heard nigger come out of this person's mouth. And, I'm at the mall, I'm on the bus, I see this student, hanging out with friends, listening to comedians. Nigger is there just, every sentence. I know, the student, I said, by the way, student, do you like Cat Williams? Oh yeah, I like Cat Williams. Well, and so now you're humiliated.
But Cat's not teaching the class.
Not teaching, okay. And Cat's also not white. Right.
Right. But Cat reckons with the meaning of that word in his comedy, something that we don't ask of our white colleagues. We don't ask a reckoning. We don't ask them we never say to our white colleagues, tell me what the word and the construct mean to you. We don't know. We just have to accept it according to your argument.
Again, I want the student to tell me what's going on. If they are reading, let's say, for instance, Huck Finn, or to go to an example that's in my book, they're in a class, and and just an aside here, I think we need to make a distinction between kids of different ages.
Of course.
I'd have a different view, for instance, if a kid's, in the fifth grade, 10th grade, 12th grade. Let's take this case. This is for real case.
Okay.
Student was at the new school, right? Postgraduate study. A white teacher is teaching James Baldwin and asked the students to take a look at the documentary about James Baldwin. The title of the documentary is "I Am Not Your Negro." And the student's teacher, the white teacher, says, "What's your view of that title? Because if you go on to YouTube and take a look at what James Baldwin actually said, he said something different. He did not say,
Right.
I am not your Negro, I am not your nigger."
Right.
That student gets, I'm humiliated. My attitude is, well, okay, first of all, tell me what you feel. And if they say they feel humiliated, I say, well, I hear you, but I have some questions for you. Did you understand? Do you think that the teacher was trying to put you down? Do you think under you're in a class? It's not like this is a stranger.
Right.
It's not like y'all just bumped into one another on a bus, never seen one another. You're in a class. You are in a class reading James Baldwin. You are discussing literature. You're discussing words and the power of words. In that setting, you mean to tell me that you feel traumatized and humiliated? If the person says, yes, they do, I'm going to just tell you straight. My view is that if we're talking to a person who has had the great benefit of a college education, and they say that they feel humiliated and traumatized in that setting, I think that they have some work to do on themselves. They ought not feel that way. Now, that pisses people off. Oh, people then jump up. I mean, it's at that point that people just jump up.
Right.
And really want to strangle me, because then they say things like, you can't tell me how to feel. And I say, no, I can't tell you how to feel. I can't tell you how to feel. But frankly, I do think that I don't think that emotions are beyond management. I think that we can educate our emotions. And so just because you feel some way doesn't tell me, I don't back off from that. I don't think that you ought to feel that way. And I think that you should think about the way you feel and should actually change the way you feel.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. But my question is, what pressure does this text put on white teachers, be they middle school, high school, college, graduate school, whatever, to actually reckon and deal with what that word and construct mean to them? So I hear you, understand. Because it feels like one has to, if one wants to take this position, one has to believe that these teachers in 2022 who have possibly read nigger and have heard from numerous Black students that they do not want that word to come out of their mouths of their teachers. I'm interested in why and if that book you wrote has the elasticity or does the work of pushing the white professor to reckon with their feelings, possibly of innocence, possibly of intellectual inquiry. Like, what are you asking of white teachers who want to, under the guise of intellectual freedom and rigor, use that word? Because I don't see you asking anything of those teachers, and I'm interested in why.
Okay, couple things. One, on the question of pressure, many teachers, and of all complexions, but particularly white teachers, on the question of pressure, they're not going to play around. They're not going to get close to this. They are not going to read James Baldwin. They are not going to read Toni Morrison. They are not going to read a text that includes the infamous N-word, because their attitude is going to be, who needs it? I am not going to chance saying the wrong thing, coming off the wrong way, and having some student report me to my bosses. So on the question of pressure, oh yeah, we have a lot of pressure. And I think, we have a lot of pressure that pushes a lot of people to avoid the subject. Question, is that a good thing? Second, are there teachers who go about their work in an ignorant fashion? Sure there are. I have no doubt that there are teachers, including white teachers, who are heedless, who are stupidly naive. I'll give you an example of that. At my alma mater, Princeton University, there was a teacher, anthropologist, who taught a course on taboo. That was the course. On the very first day of the class, the teacher said something along the lines of, he used nigger somehow.
Right.
Is it worse for me to say nigger or for me to punch somebody in the nose? Something. And some of the black students got very upset and ended up marching out of class. There was a big controversy about it. Indeed, he soon closed down the class, just said, class is over, I'm not teaching this. Now, in my view, all parties involved looked bad to me.
Mm-hmm.
The students, so you're taking a class on taboo, and you're going to get hot and bothered because nigger came out of the teacher's mouth. What did you think you were going to talk about in a class on taboo? But I'm also down on the teacher.
Right.
I thought, you mean to tell me you're going to teach a class on taboo? You are going to use nigger, and then you're going to sort of surprise. How can anybody, you're not going to be ready when somebody jumps up and says, I object. Well, you're not prepared.
Right. Yes.
You're not prepared. You shouldn't, frankly, it's bad on you to be talking about being a professor teaching a course on taboo, and you're not ready to deal with the students. You should have been ready to deal with those students. So, does that happen? Sure, that happens. That happens too.
Right. And I guess what I'm asking is, we teach in different parts of the country, right? Mm-hmm. I spent the last 5 years teaching at a place called University of Mississippi, mm-hmm. Where the National Guard had to make sure the first Black student could attend those classes. And where, a few semesters ago before the pandemic, a number of well-meaning, quote unquote, thoughtful white professors use that word, and I get the call, right? Like I get the call then from the students, from the Black students saying what they feel. And they do not just feel humiliated, they feel humiliated and they feel angry, right? And then you get the call from the white students who feel something like that. And so I think space and place matter as well. But I want to kind of just flip it a bit, right? And what you've done so well in this book, and this is what we said before we got on, it's like, what I love about that introduction, particularly the end, and what I love about you is that you are willing to play. And when people come at you, you play. You know, you dance, and you play. There's a playfulness to the word nigga. It is my favorite word. I love it. I use it. I explore it in everything I do, everything I write. But in the same breath, a lot of the music that I listen to uses that B word. Not the same, but a pejorative, harmful, humiliating word. I'm interested in what happens if we are reading a text from somebody who uses that word in class, and the majority of our students, like me, are either women or femme, right? And I start to say that word, and the people in that class start to say, Professor Laymon, we would like it if you did not say that word because you don't know what it's like to be treated like that. Am I then to say, privately or publicly, you shouldn't feel that way? I'm talking about I'm actually asking you to think about whether or not your stance on nigga is your stance on the F word and the B word. And if there's any difference, which there might not be, I'm interested in why. And do you think there should be a difference in the way you and I, right, as supposedly cis, masculine presenting people use the F word or the B word? I don't say those words, but if I just want to say is there a difference, or is it the same principle and theory to you?
For me, it would be the same. I do not draw status distinctions in the realm of culture. So therefore, I am not going to say that a woman is privileged to say things that I cannot say. No. I'm Black. Am I privileged to say something that white people cannot say? Nope. Am I privileged to talk about things, to explore things that whites cannot explore? No, I don't know. The realm of culture is open to all, and we have to make a judgment. Do Black people use the infamous N-word in terrible, racist ways? Yeah, sure, some do. And when they do, I'm against them. Same, on the other hand, are there Black people who use the infamous N-word in ways that are, that I find completely tolerable?
Affirming.
Absolutely, yes. And would I open that possibility up to a white person? Sure, I would.
So you go ahead. You've had a white person call you nigga in an affirming way, and that felt affirming to you.
I have been friends with white people who use nigger or nigga, and I don't make for me that's
right.
It's all it's
right.
I note the distinction, but they're part. It's the same thing for me. And it doesn't bother me. No.
So wait, we're language people. So I just want to say, you have white friends who, for example,
nigga, please. So a white friend who, in a particular setting, says nigga, please, in the way that Black people say nigga, please. We know, it's a sort of. Does that, what? Am I bothered? No, I'm not bothered with that. Now, I will say this. When my book came out 20 years ago, for about 7 years, every week I would get a bunch of emails, usually very often from white kids. It's mainly from white kids, mainly boys, teenagers. And this is what they would say. They would say, I like rap. I like listening to rap with my Black friends.
Right.
And my question I have for you, Professor Kennedy, is it okay for me to sing the songs including the N-word, with my friends. I got this, Kiese, I got this so often that I created a form letter response. Wow. So that I didn't have to keep, I didn't want to keep doing this thing from scratch. I created a form letter response. And what I said to them was, I said, listen, first of all, I'm flattered that you asked me, but frankly, you should talk with your friends. Mm-hmm. And then even after you talk with your friends, no matter what they say, let me just add one thing. Let's suppose that you talk with your friend, your Black friend, and your Black friend says, well, I know where you're coming from, and it's all right. I'm gonna say, that does not exhaust the issue, because if you go to, let's say, a theater and you're talking with your Black friend and nigger comes out of your mouth, there might be somebody sitting right behind you whose fist is going to go right in your jaw, because they are not going to know you. They're going to see a white person, and they're going to hear nigger come out of the white person's mouth, and before you, pow. And I said, so one thing that you need to think about is the problem of mistake. And it's one thing to as a matter of principle, I'm not against you, but there is such a thing as prudence. And it seems to me that you need to take on board the fact that in using this term, you are really making yourself, you've got to take on a burden. And I guess, Kiese, what you're saying is the white teacher.
I was going to go there.
The white teacher. Fine, taking on the burden. And I think that's fine. I don't have a problem. I'm simply saying, fine, teacher, teach your Baldwin, take on the burden, do your job well. And I'm simply saying to everybody, onlookers, do not say as a matter of principle that this teacher cannot take this on. Let the teacher take it on.
Right. And I think the rupture that we have, and it's a healthy rupture to me, is that it feels like you're asking more of the white boy in the movie theater than we might ask of our non-Black colleagues. Because again, textually, there is no demand or ask in the text of white folks and their pedagogy to think about, do your work, and again, much more importantly, reckon with your relationship, not to the word, but to the construct. And after reading nigga the first time, that's what I want to thank you for, is like that language is language I started to bring into my classroom. All of these words we're going to use in these classrooms, y'all, are some of them are going to be pejorative. I don't want us to just say we're not going to do that, we're not going to do this. But what I do want is for every single person in here to consider their relationship to the construct as much as they consider their relationship to the word. And if one considers their relationship to a construct that they have never been harmed by, confined by, some people are going to be like, you know what? My relationship with that word leads me to believe I should not say it because I have never been treated that way and it causes harm. Other people are going to say something else. But the text that you present us, which is a rich text, it just never, it doesn't ask anything of that white teacher. And I just want to be honest with you. When I read the new version, the first thing I said was, man, this nigga wrote the fuck out of that shit. That's what I said to myself. This nigga wrote the fuck out of that shit. And these white professors who in faculty meetings try to say that shit slickly, in offices try to say that shit, and in classrooms are going to applaud this text the way they applauded the first text. And I just wonder what you think and feel about that. But I think you've answered. But go ahead.
I will say this. If it's the case, and it may be, I'll have to reread the thing. If it's the case, and it may be, let's say that it is. If I have not I have not put the pressure that I just articulated on the page, my fault, and I will attend to that for the next version.
Real. That's what we. That's education, right? Yes.
Yeah. I'm not gonna. I mean, it's and by the way, and I don't even feel badly about that. The fact of the matter is, I write something, I give it out. I'm sure you do too. I give it out to a certain number of people. I get feedback. I try to assess their feedback and bring into the text, points that I think are useful. You do the best that you can. You have deadlines. You do the best that you can.
Yes.
Is it going to be perfect? No, it's not going to be perfect. Are there going to be things that come up in conversations like this?
Yes.
Sure, they're going to be. And so for the next iteration, I've been taking notes, and I will try to do better. It doesn't bother me.
Well, and I don't know that it's better, right? This is my argument. My argument is not that it's necessarily better, but
no, I think you make a good point. If what you just said is true, I think that that's a legitimate critique of what I've written, and I think that it could be bettered by adding a bit on that. And saying to the teacher, saying to any teacher, frankly, given the volatility of this word, given the way that people act towards it, rightly or wrongly, you've got to recognize that there's a burden if you're going to go there.
Yes, I would say we hope so, right? Like, I teach courses on Black satire and comedy. I used to teach a lot of courses on hip hop, and one of the things that I saw in a Baldwin course, I taught a Baldwin seminar at Vassar College, and one of my students, brilliant student, Black woman from Milwaukee. We're reading these texts. We're reading the text. We're reading where Baldwin talks about his necessity of exploiting a nigga within and a nigga without, all of that. And the student says, in a room filled with probably 120 people, I just want to say, I would like it if white students didn't say that word anymore because it hurts. In the same class, Professor Kennedy, these white students proceeded to say that shit, boom, a boom, a boom. Because this student, who happened to be one of the top 2 or 3 students in the classroom, infringed on their right to say what they want because they believe themselves, like, as these colleges encourage our students, sadly, to believe that, utterances of nigga that demean and take away interiority are what those folks over there do. They proceeded to use that word so many times, I had to stop the class and then I had to jump in and do my thing. That is not every classroom. But what I think that you do in your book is that it seems that you believe that the white student or the white professor or the non-Black professor is coming from a place where they do not themselves invest in all of the shit that made nigga what it was in the first place. Go ahead.
Did you push back at all on the student who said, I want the white people to stop doing blah, blah, blah?
No. I definitely, how do you push back on someone who is actually in tears and shaking because of what people who would never be called nigga did? A nigga said, please stop using this word nigga. It makes me feel like shit when it comes out of your mouth. And these white folks was like, nigger, 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 right? So no, I would not ever say to that young woman, because I think she was right. But I also did not say, I think you're right. What I did say is, that space should not be a space of harm. Institutionally, you're already harmed in all these ways. Now let me check them in other ways. So I did do that, but no, I'm not gonna tell that woman that. I thought it'd take a lot of courage to do what she did.
Okay, I guess I have a less generous view. I want to go back to your comment, Ole Miss.
Yeah.
The student you were talking about was, of course, James Meredith. James Meredith, by the way, was not the first Black person to go to Ole Miss.
Right.
He was the first out Black person to go to Ole Miss.
Right.
There was a Black person during World War II who was in the Navy who wasn't passing, by the way. He was just light-skinned and nobody asked him what he was. He was just living life.
We call that passing in Mississippi. Okay, I'll feel you, but we call that passing. But I got you. Go ahead.
Well, passing is a very interesting term. It's a very interesting term. It wasn't like he said he was white. He just didn't say anything, and people took him to be white. Anyway, James Meredith, however, said straight out, "I am a Negro." He said that in his application. He wasn't beating around the bush. I would say to students, and if a student was tearing up and was saying, "I'm discombobulated by this," I could easily imagine myself saying, well, I want to talk about everything.
Yeah.
And I think everything should be talked about. On the question of how you feel, however, I want to talk. I'm not going to defer to your tears, and I'm not going to defer to your saying that you're traumatized. And, where would we be if James Meredith and John Lewis and all of the greats of that era, where would we be if they acted the way that you're acting?
I think they did act the way they were. If you think James Meredith and John Lewis did not cry over the way they were treated, if you think they did not feel humiliated, I mean, fam, this is science fiction then. And I love science fiction. But do you think they were humiliated? Do you think they felt like, go ahead, layers of terror? Of course they did, right?
I have an older brother. Around those folks' age, going to overwhelmingly white institutions. My sense is that those pioneers faced what they faced with a different ethos than some of our students today. And some of our students today, as far as I'm concerned, it has not been an advance. I mean, the folks who, I want to change the world. I want to change the world, but you know what? I can't think straight if we're in a class talking about James Baldwin's work if a white person quotes James Baldwin. What?
If a white person quotes James Baldwin, right? Because I want to grant what I feel like is not being granted to this student with no context for how they come to the sentence or the word. We are coming at this from different places. I understand the conventional sort of understanding that professors have about this generation of students being less resilient. And I don't buy it. First of all, we know what, being a tough guy, if we want to call James Meredith a tough guy with his Republican ass. Let's talk about the ways.
He was a tough guy. I don't apologize. Apologize for.
He can be a tough guy, Professor Kennedy. But the question is, I think you've answered it. Should we ask Black students 50 years, 60 years later to be as publicly or privately tough as we see some of our Black quote unquote heroes being, when we know that performance of toughness tore their insides apart, completely tore their insides apart? So when I see a student who has the wherewithal to say, I know this space is performatively and really for all intents and purposes not mine or not Black, but I ain't gonna let a motherfucking teacher say or utter the N-word, if that's how I can feel, like, to me, there's a toughness in saying that, because I know a lot of other Black students who feel it and whisper it and don't say it. So I don't think that what we call now, these kids are delicate flowers because they fucking want to tend to their mental health. Shit, you know probably more than me. A lot of the people that we're talking about were fucked up from not tending to that mental health, Professor Kennedy. Like we know that, right? Or do we not?
What I think we are. I mean, what's good if I'm in a class talking about James Baldwin? I do not want James Baldwin's language to be erased or Baudelarized.
No, that is not right. Right. But what we might want is for the teacher, regardless of race or space, to talk about their relationship with the precise language Baldwin is using. Why? Because somebody named Professor Kennedy wrote a book called Nigger 20 years ago. So I need to know from that professor that you have done the reading, have done the thinking, to quote Baldwin, done the quaking of what it means in this haunted space to use those words. And I'm trying to say about a book that has changed the way I think and feel about language is that I hope and wish in subsequent editions that you ask more of these teachers. Because it feels like a free for all, and free for alls are paid for often by Black folk.
I hear that. I don't disagree with what you just said. I will say, however, I've been in settings where the elaboration that you want, that is to say, the teacher discussing their relationship with the word or their thinking, that can't happen.
No,
because there are students who, again, perform, they act out.
Come on, man.
And won't allow it.
But again, if you're doing it, it's like we're making the teacher the snowflake when we know that, when we come from, we're part of a group of people who either secretly or publicly talk about these students as snowflakes. Like, snowflake can't touch it. And your whole thing is these teachers know that there's going to be consequences for you using that word and not giving us any context for what it means. You motherfucking right, there's going to be consequences. You talked about the consequence in a movie theater. A motherfucker might get jabbed in the face. And let me just tell you one thing you taught me indirectly. Over the last 20 years, I have changed. I love that word. I adore that word. Again, when I read the book, I was like, this nigga's writing his ass off. When we about to get on here, I was like, man, I can't wait to get up on here with one of my fucking like mentor type niggas. That's what I said to say to myself. But unlike 20 years ago, if I have Black students who say, Kiese, Professor Laymon, I hear what you're saying about that word. I understand what you feel. I've read all the shit you feel. And you saying that word makes me feel ill, sad, humiliated. I'm not saying that shit.
Really?
Really?
Wow.
Really? If a Black student has the wherewithal to say to me that my saying that word harms them, similarly, I'm not going to say no F word or no B word because I know it would hurt people. I'm not saying you need to feel that way. But what I am saying is your book and wrestling with your book encouraged me to change my stance. And so I want to thank you for that, even if it was indirectly. And I just hope that, like, as we continue to evolve pedagogically, we can ask as much as the teachers who actually have far more power than we ask of the students. That's where I am.
Okay. I had a student once, we were talking about a case, the famous Japanese American internment case, Kawamatsu versus the United States. And we were talking about this case and I was using various hypotheticals. For instance, I said, what would you, in the actual case, there was no evidence of espionage or sabotage by people of Japanese ancestry. But I said, let's suppose that there had been, let's say, 25 instances or episodes. Would your view be different? We were talking about this in class. In any event, a student after class came down to me very angry and said, Professor Kennedy, I feel deeply insulted by the way that you were, spinning out hypotheticals about this, racist case. You were just, intellectualizing, and the horror of the case was not really brought home, and I feel deeply insulted. And my response was, well, you've told me that you feel deeply insulted. I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about why, because frankly, if you just tell me you've been insulted, all that tells me is that you've been insulted. I mean, maybe you are rightly insulted or wrongly insulted. If I have said something that ought to, that you should rightly feel, angry about, I might apologize.
Right.
On the other hand, if all you're saying to me is you feel bad, I don't know. I mean, if I was talking about the greatness of Martin Luther King Jr. and some Klansman came down and said, that makes me feel bad, I mean, my response would be good. So, I mean, I think we need to be very careful about our response to, people's expressions of, their feelings.
We do, and we also need to historicize that particular kinds of people in this culture have not been granted the privilege or power of feeling, right? Of publicly feeling. Like our public feeling often led to lynchings where I'm from. But let's get to these questions. You got a ton of questions. Let's try to get through as many as possible. One of the first ones: did your editor/publisher try to dissuade you from using nigger as the title of your book?
No. Although initially I wrote the book up as a series of lectures. They all appeared as lectures first. And then I put them together, sent them to my editor, and I didn't have a title. I had no title. And he says, well, we got to have a title. And initially I came up with Nigger. The only thing he said was, well, we got to have a subtitle. And I think he said I think he said that partly for bibliographical reasons. He just said you can't, you have to have a subtitle. And it took me a day or two to come up with a subtitle. But that's the only thing about with the publishing house and the question of the title. I have had a lot of people who've been very angry, have expressed anger at me for the title. So there are people, for instance, who have said, "Oh, Kennedy, you're just a sensationalist. This was just a sensationalistic way of your trying to market your writing." And on that, of course, on that one, I say, yeah, you're right.
Right. How dare you try to bring people to your book?
Exactly.
Right. What's wrong with you? All right, another one. This is another one. I'm trying to get as many in as 5 minutes. I knew we needed 2 hours for this conversation because it's so rich. For predominantly white schools looking to write policies around the use of racial epithets and slurs, tempted to put complete bans in place in response to harm specifically caused by white teachers and students reading the N-word, how can we compel these institutions to empower Black students to, I think I know what you're gonna say to this, to reclaim the N-word if they choose? Thoughts on the issue of white institutions trying to mitigate the harm that white community members have caused by policing the expression of Black students?
I think that all institutions, no matter, white, Black, whatever, the best way, as far as I'm concerned, of dealing with this is to tell the whole story of the word, and especially the beginning story. Again, let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back 50 minutes. This is a word that was there at the lynchings. This was a word that was there at the burnings. This is a word that is part of the soundtrack of racial atrocity.
Right.
Everybody should know that. Now, is that all they should know? No, they need to know more, but they need to know that. And then go on and just, sort of lay it all out. I think if it's laid out, that is what an educational institution should do. On the question of bans, I'll just say Washington, D.C. in, I think it was in the 1930s, had a ban on the infamous N-word. You know that the publication that was thrown out of the schools first because of the ban? The Crisis. The Crisis. Wow. The magazine of the NAACP, because the Crisis was criticizing some racist demagogue and quoted what the racist demagogue said, including the infamous N-word, and that publication was the one that was thrown out.
Right.
That's what we've got to, when you talk about bans, be careful.
Yeah. Okay. We got 3 more minutes. Let me just try to get Dr. Kennedy. What, if any, do you find to be the proper place for emotion in the classroom? Related, what makes an emotional response sufficiently legitimate to change their action behavior around, and how do we know?
I mean, emotion is going to be there and ought to be there. I think passion's a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. Passion can propel love of learning. I mean, love of learning, that's an emotion. That's, passion. I'm all for that. But it should also be disciplined by thought. Mm-hmm. And so I want passion, but I also want passions to be questioned.
Right.
I want them to be managed. I want them to be subjected to thought.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this one just came in. I don't know. Sounds like they might know you. I'm not sure. Randall, how would it have gone down if your Princeton professor, they're talking about the anecdote, how would it have gone down if your Princeton professor had been a queer woman, and why?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure how. I don't know.
Okay. Whoa, this is a tough one. Question for Dr. Kennedy. Do you equate the feelings of a Klansman in a class to that of a Black student? And if so, I'd be curious to hear more about this. Do you equate the feelings of a Klansman in class to that of a Black student? I think you understand the question.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine having a student in a class who is a Ku Klux Klansman. Mm-hmm. And the question would be, if the Ku Klux Klansman student said that my valorizing Martin Luther King Jr. made him feel bad, I would say to the person, well, fine, you've told me that you feel bad. Am I going to apologize for your feeling bad? Am I going to back off of what I've said? No. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the great people in the history of the world. And as for your feeling bad, you ought to rethink your feelings about that.
Okay. Morgan, can I get one more in? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, one more. And thank y'all so much for making space. And thank you so much, Morgan, for always creating robust spaces for us to actually engage in real ways. So this is the last question. When the Black student challenges the teacher on the use of the word nigger, they are challenging the system via the teacher, who is a representative of a racialized system and is also in a position of power. Why do we continue to individualize situations that are clearly about bigger issues of racism?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, systems, organizations, forces work through people. And so, it's never a system that all of these systems, the school system has agents called teachers, and that's so we're asking, how should a student interact vis-a-vis a teacher? I'm not, by the way, I'm not denying that there are bigger issues involved.
Right.
Yeah, there are big issues involved. And the question is, how should we deal with those larger issues? And I guess ultimately, and I'm aware that we're on our way out, ultimately what I want to say is that our salvation lies in openness, lies in candor, lies in pluralism, lies in a willingness to think, rethink, be willing to change our minds, be willing to accept that other people have views which might be different than ours, but that doesn't mean that they are demons. That doesn't mean that they are stupid or anything. It's just that the world's a big place and there are lots of different ideas that inhabit our world. Listen, I've really appreciated talking with you.
Me too. Thank you for playing, family. You also think you always come out to play. You don't hide, and I appreciate it. And thank you, Morgan, for making a space for us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I really wish I could extend this conversation. It was really good, and I appreciate being here to listen to you both. And of course, on behalf of Politics and Prose, thank you, Randall Kennedy, for doing this event with us. And thank you, Kiese, for moderating yet another event with us. We always appreciate when you come through and do that. And of course, those of you at home, thank you for tuning in, especially on a Sunday afternoon. Please purchase Nigger from Politics and Prose. The link is in the chat. I'm sure that some of your questions that you asked today can also be answered through the book. And I wish you all a happy Sunday and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.